We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. I am so excited about tonight's guest, my friend Dr. Joan Thaxter Randall. Joan, would you please introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hello, Bree. I'm so excited to be here with you again. We have done this a few times before. My name is Dr. Joan T. Randall. I am the founder and owner of Victorious You Press. It's a publishing company where we help individuals to write and publish their best-selling books for impact and influence, and then leverage those books to create multiple streams of income and leave a legacy. I am also the co-executive director for a nonprofit in Charlotte called the Boost Pad, where we help early stage business owners give them the platform to build their business, to grow and scale so that we can have economic impact in the city of Charlotte. And then I am an elder at I Believe God Ministries International and the head of their women's ministry. So I have a lot of stuff in my hat, and but I wear it well because it allows me to be at the intersection of mission, ministry, and the marketplace.
You are a very busy woman.
Yes, I have.
I would like to say to the viewers, please feel free to post your questions and comments. If you watch the replay, please feel free to post your comments, and Joan and I will be more than happy to get in touch with you. So, Joan, I'll jump right into it with my first question. Please tell us about the Second Wind anthology and your docufilm launch.
Yeah, so I happen to have a copy of the book right here with me. So, a few years ago, this whole thought came to me about the second wind. And the second wind is basically life for a second time, for lack of a better word. A lot of us have gone through trials and tribulations and hurdles and ups and downs and back and forth. And we get to a certain age and we take a pause and we say to ourselves, is this it? This can't be it, right? I'm in my late 40s or late 50s, and there has to be more to life than just the system, than just the everyday humdrum of life, right? And what does that look like? And so when I think about my life and how I spent 25 years in corporate and then I was done, but I left corporate when I was in my 50s. And I felt like, wait a minute, I have all these lived experiences, learned experiences. So now I get to do something else. And this whole thing about, going through a divorce and coming out of certain things, but God giving me the opportunity to start a business, seeing the business thrive, doing amazing things, executive producing a documentary and all the different things, having my honorary doctorate. I'm like, I am in my second wind. And in this point of the second wind, wisdom is what speaks, right?
Yes.
Because everything else prior to that, you're trying to, navigate life. But the second wind, you have navigated life and you have a little bit more wisdom, and that's what you utilize to just keep going. And so that's where the thought and the idea of the second wind came from. And we just launched it last Saturday. It was fantastic. We have a documentary. It's out there on YouTube for anybody who wants to watch it. And I'm just really proud of the 12 women that shared one chapter of their story in the book. So that's the second wind.
That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing. And I think that, as I was listening to, I'm like, it's like Joan is reading my mind because that's where I am now. The
Mhm.
second wind, it's like, what will I do for the rest of my life? I mean, I'm still working, I'm not retired, but it's like sometimes you say to yourself, there has to be more,
Yeah.
there has to be more. So my next question, please tell us about the self-publishing cohort and what is it?
So I had this, I'm always kind of put ideas, right? I don't know. God downloads so many things to me. And one thing I could say is every download I get, I try it or I see it through. And so as a publishing company, first of all, as a business owner, you always have to be able to understand your business and pivot, right? Um, Things change in business, things change in the environment, things change in people's pocket. So as a business owner, you have to always think about, how can I still stay relevant to my audience, right? Where can I meet them? So if people are not paying $5,000 and $6,000 to publish a book, people still want to write. And so people want to say, I don't have $5,000 to pay to get a publisher to publish my book. So I want to self publish. The problem is, a lot of times people self publish, but don't have the knowledge of the publishing standards. So their book is lackluster. No bookstore would carry their books because of how it's formatted internally, because of what the cover looks like, because of the categories, because of not even using keyword phrases, right? So I decide to meet my audience where there is a need. And so because there's so many people that wanted to self-publish, I decided to do a self-publishing cohort, which is where we bring a group of people together and we walk them through the self-publishing journey the right way. So it's an 8-week program, and every person that's a part of that program has to write, market, create their book cover, do all the things in 8 weeks.
Wow.
And so Saturday, we had 9 authors publish their books simultaneously as I was teaching them online. So all 9 people had their computer up, all of them had their books, and I walked them through the self-publishing process. And yesterday, 9 people published their books simultaneously. It was fantastic.
How exciting.
It is.
That is exciting. You are very experienced in what you do, and
Mhm.
I think it makes a difference. There was a young lady years ago when I did a show with Gwen, and her book was actually very good, but there were so many mistakes. And she said the publisher, because in fact you were interested in the book, and I remember you pointing out there
Yep.
were a lot of mistakes in the book, which was so unfortunate because it was a good book. The material was really great. So yeah, I mean, I'm you know what, Joan, what I like about you, you're always thinking. You're
Girl,
always a step ahead.
this brain works even in my sleep. My sleep. I'm always coming up with something else or thinking of something else. And let me tell you what was the most humbling thing yesterday was every one of those authors could not believe that in 8 weeks they wrote and completely published a book in 8 weeks, because there were some of them that were a part of this there's 12 people a part of the cohort. 9 of them got to upload their books yesterday, and 3 are doing it sometime this week, right? But the most important thing is they never believed that they would have been able to write a book in 30 days.
Yes.
They can't believe it, right? And yes, I can be tough. Yes, I'm a stickler because I know that they could do it, right? Because they had wanted to write, some 10 years, some 5 years, some, oh my God, I've wanted to do this forever. I just don't have the time. But when you have someone that's supporting and training and leading, people tend to, and they showed up. That's the most important thing. They showed up. Every Tuesday we had a class, and they showed up for every class. They put the work in. Victorious U Press did the proofreading. We created the book covers. We helped them with the formatting. And then yesterday, we just all simultaneously, they all uploaded their book at the same time. I videotaped it because it was so incredible when they all shouted on the Zoom, "We are published." It made me feel so good about that. So yeah.
There's that sense of accomplishment.
Oh my goodness. And to just watch them, to see the joy. One of the authors, her birthday is coming up this week, and she said, I gave myself a birthday gift. And she had been wanting to write her book for 10 years.
Wow.
And in 8 weeks she got it done. It's there's nothing that the human spirit cannot accomplish if you put your mind to it.
Amen to that. What I'm hoping by the end of this podcast, I'm hoping those out there who have had this dream, like myself,
Yeah.
that they will really take this into consideration and just believe in themselves and know that it is possible.
Yeah. Bree, when I did this book, The Second Wind, right? This is my 17th book.
Wow.
since 2016, right? 9 years ago, it was the first time I wrote my 17th book. It's possible. And I've helped about going on 500 people now.
You know what you're doing. That's the thing about this. I promise the viewers, I'll tell you now. If I have someone on this show, it's someone that I know, someone
Yeah.
that I trust, someone that I believe in. I've had Joan on several times, and I've spoken about her book. In fact, she's come on to talk about her book,
Yeah.
Bags in the Attic. And my first question is, like, why should we share our stories? And I've said it to you before.
Mhm.
Your book, Bags in the Attic, I was able to see my mother, but I was also able to see myself. You are the only other person that I know of that was in a situation like my mother where you had to make an escape.
Yeah.
It gave me a chance to really reflect on my mother's story, have an appreciation for the bravery that it took, and you understand, because the fear of being caught,
Yeah.
especially when you've experienced violence, you don't know what may happen to you, what may happen to your children.
Yeah.
So I was able to, relate to you as a woman that has gone through a divorce.
Mhm.
I was able to relate to your children. I could so relate to them because as I read your book, I went back to being that young girl
Yeah.
that witnessed my mom experience these things. And there were things that I just didn't understand. You helped me to connect the dots. You allowed me to go back to a place in time. If I'm reading a book and I'm visualizing and I can imagine what, then trust me, it's a good book.
Yeah.
And it's like I could see you, I could see your kids, but I could also see my mom, and I could see myself, I could see my siblings. And it took me back to the plane ride. It took to from England to Jamaica. It
Wow.
took me back to my mom waking us up that morning and packing, and it just, but it helped me to make peace with that situation because it was unexpected. It's like one day I'm living in England and the next day I'm in Jamaica. There was no mental preparation for it. So, I mean, it was culture shock. There was a lot of
Yeah.
things that I had to really adjust to. But back in those days, it's like children were seen and not heard, basically. So
Yeah.
I could never articulate how I felt about things or express how I felt about certain things. When you wrote about your daughter's rebellion and what you were going through with your daughter,
Mhm.
I had so much respect for you
Thank
for
you.
being so authentic. It helped me to understand my younger self and say to myself, you know what, you weren't crazy back then. You had every right to feel the way that you did, and it wasn't about blaming anyone. But when you go through certain situations, and especially if it's something that you're not familiar with, it can be very traumatizing. And
Absolutely.
I think too many of us have become just too familiar with trauma, and that's what we expect in life. That's what we have embraced in life, and that's what we have made our story. So I think you writing your story as you did so authentically, you didn't whitewash your story. You told the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I appreciated it because I think you allowed a lot of women to heal as they read your book.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know what? My gosh, I'm not the only one that's done this.
Uh-huh.
I'm not the only one that's made this mistake. But not only that, to see you overcome. I mean, look at you now, and that's what helped me to do a lot of healing. You helped me going through my divorce, but also being able to connect, like they talk about the inner child. I was able to reconnect with my younger self and, like I said, heal. So why should we share our stories? I think I gave one of the reasons why, but in your words, why
You
should we
gave
share stories?
Bree, you gave all the reasons why, right? Stories are relatable, right? It speaks to the human existence. That's the most important thing about telling your story. It speaks to the human existence. It lets people know that they are not alone. They're not their experience. It might be unique to them, but the experience itself is not unique because there's nothing new under the sun. Although
Yes.
my situation might be a little different, it was still domestic violence. Your domestic violence situation might be a little bit different, but it's still domestic violence, right?
Yes.
But telling the story allow people that are going through the experience to see that, you know what, Joan went through it and Joan was able to survive. As a matter of fact, my company, Victorious You Press, is because I became a victor instead of, you know what I mean, a victim.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's where that whole thing came from, right? Stories connect us to each other. It's like a
Yes.
fabric that ties us, like the ties that bind. And it shows us that we can experience the same thing no matter the age, no matter the ethnicity, no matter the background, no matter
Yes.
the religious affiliation. We are all the same at the end of the day. And so it's important to tell the story. I know, I think we'll talk about making sure that your children know the story too. But it is important to share the story so others can see what is possible.
Yes. You know, as you were saying those words, I thought back to the first time I listened to Dear Mama by Tupac.
Mm,
As I listened to that song for the very first time, I will never forget, I cried. I
wow.
cried when I listened to that song because he told a very powerful story in that song.
Yeah.
You know, and as he spoke about, you know, my mother was never addicted to drugs.
Hmm.
I never sold drugs. I
Right.
couldn't relate to Tupac on that level, but
Yeah.
I could relate to his love for his mother. He was in prison at the time that song was released. As I was listening, as I listened to that song, it's like I'm thinking of this guy being in prison but having regrets and all the things that, you know, you second guess, you look back, and hindsight is always 2020. But that song, Dear Mom, if you've never listened to that song before, I would tell the viewers, you know, please listen to it. That story, it made me have a whole new level of respect for him. He was so honest in the telling of his story in that song. I'd like to welcome Mikey. Thank you so much for tuning in, Mikey.
Hi, Mikey friend.
So, your authenticity. Talk about the importance of authenticity in our stories.
Yeah. Well, there is no other way that you can tell your story, right? You have to own it. You have to be authentic to you. You cannot be anybody else but you because your lived experiences is connected to you, right? You can't live somebody else's experience, right? It can be similar, but it is very important that you stay authentic and true to who you are and the story and the experience that you have had, right?
Yes,
A lot of people don't want to share their story because of shame, but if shame is the reason for you not sharing your story, then you are doing a disservice to the person out there that needs your story for their
yes,
breakthrough.
yes, which leads to owning your story. How important is it to own your story?
Owning your story is taking power over it. Because once you take power over it, no one else can tell that story, right?
Yes,
Because here's the thing, you know, we have our lived experiences, right? And there are people out there that may know what we experience.
yes,
There's people out there that knew that I experienced domestic violence, that knew that when I was in Jamaica, there were certain things that happened to me. People can tell your story in their version, and it may never be the truth, right?
yes,
The whole truth and nothing but the truth. And here's the thing, people can use your story if they tell it and hold it over your head so you become the hostage.
Yes.
Someone else telling your story. But baby, when you take that power and
Yes.
you own your story and you tell the raw, ugly truth about your story, no one can hold that story over your head. Because
Yes.
now you just share it. Like, listen, this is me. This is what happened. Sexual assault, all of this stuff. It happened to me. So no one
Yes.
can hold that over your head. Not a family member, not a brother, not a sister, not a perp, not the person who abused you. No one can hold that over your head because
Yes.
you are telling it in your own words. And that's authentic
That's power right there. I
power.
think it's power, and I think you're empowering the next person that is sharing your experience, but they're embarrassed and afraid to really express what has happened to them. So I think when you're courageous enough and authentic enough to share your true story, you're setting someone else free. I mean, what's your comment on that, Joan?
Of course, you're setting someone else free because I'll be honest with you. We have sold, and I've said this to you before, we have now sold about 7,000 copies of Bags in the Attic,
Yeah, I
right?
believe it's a great book.
And there are people that said, if you didn't share what you shared in that book, I would not have written my own book,
Yeah,
right? Because they look at you in a certain way, right? Especially when that book came out, it was 2020. I was already ordained as a minister, as an elder, right?
yes,
And so here is the elder, and you're reading a book about the elder, and in the book is telling you I had three men
yeah,
all at the same time in different
yeah.
areas of Jamaica, right? Now that's embarrassing, but it is
But it was your
true.
truth at the
It's
time. That
true.
was your truth at the time. Remember when I finished that book, as soon as I finished it, I texted you.
You
I
did.
texted you and I thanked you for your authenticity because you gave me permission then to own some of the stupid things I had done. Look, we were all raised to be good girls.
That's
Let's
right.
face it. We were raised to be good girls. And a lot of us have carried that shame because we did things that we knew better. That we knew that's not how we were raised. We were not supposed to do certain things. But listen, life happens, things happen. So the fact that you were so real in that book, I'm not lying to you. I commend you for it. But at the same time, like I said, your authenticity, it set me free. I know it set a lot of other women free. I will never stop talking about that book,
Yeah.
Bags in the Attic, because, like I said, it was a part of my healing journey. And you sharing your story about domestic abuse, it allowed me, it gave me a voice. That's why I'm doing my podcast today, because I found my voice.
I love that. I love that.
For years, I didn't have a voice. And in losing my son, going through a divorce, starting all over in my 50s, it was a very scary time.
Yeah.
But during that period, I found my voice. You said it to me when you chastised me that day. Where is the girl that I knew in high school, the girl that I looked up to? And I cried that day. But I thank you, and I've thanked you before, but I'll thank you again for being so tough with me because it was what I needed to hear. And I'm saying this because I want the viewers to understand the power of your words. You can build someone up or you can tear them down. I'm telling you, there's more power when you build someone else up. And
Yeah.
I think it takes a weak and a cowardly person to tear someone down. It shows your own insecurities
Mhm.
because I think if you're feeling great about yourself, all you want to do is lift others up.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that,
Yeah,
Joan?
absolutely. And that's I'm every morning I wake up, right? I say to, well, I give God praise first, and then I say, Lord, whose life can I impact? Everything I do right now, Bree, whether it's the ministry, it's the mission, or the marketplace, which is what I call my business, it is all about serving. All
Yes.
I do is serve. All I do is serve. I serve people because oftentimes I see the greatness in them that they don't see, right? And I just want them to be able to tap into that and say, you know what? Do this, do that, be yourself, be authentic, tell your story. There is no shame in your story.
No.
Trust me, you are not the only one that has experienced it. And one of the reasons why I was so open in my book, here's why I was so open in my book, Bree. I didn't want to paint a picture that I was perfect, but this man was horrible.
Right. I
See what
get it. I get it. I get it.
I had some mess too. And when you get ready to heal, go to a healing journey, you've got to self actualize. You got to look in the mirror and said, okay, now, Miss Joan T. Randall or Joan Thaxter, who are you?
Yes.
What have you done? You better acknowledge the bad, acknowledge the mess, look the mess in its face and said, yes, I did this and I was wrong and I need to work on that. And
Yes.
once you can acknowledge your mess and work on the mess, you've taken power over who you are. Nobody.
That's what made your book so authentic. Because yeah, your ex-husband was a jerk in my opinion, you know, but you didn't make you made sure you told everyone, "Hey, look, I did some messed up things. I made some awful mistakes." That's what to me that gave your book even more credibility. Because it's like I'm going to believe everything you said because you were truthful about the mistakes that you made as well as the mistakes that he made. So I really do appreciate that, and I'm hoping this is sinking in for people, because sometimes when we're telling our stories, we want to be the hero, we want to be the good guy,
Yeah.
but were you really the hero? Were you really the good guy? No.
Yeah.
So my next question is, this is what I'd like to ask you. What do you think about this phrase? Never envy anyone for their story.
Yeah, you can't, right? Because you don't know what they've been through, right?
Yes.
You don't know the fire that they had to walk through in their story.
Yes.
And a lot of times we tell our story and it's not the whole truth. When I say not the whole truth, I shouldn't say that. It's not the whole story, because when you're writing a book about your life, you really can't tell 56 years of your life in a book.
True.
So you find the parts that are most profound, that can impact lives, and you tell it. But there's other things that are more preliminary, or I would say secondary, that has happened to you. You can't envy someone for anything, not
Yes.
even for where they are. So there's people that have not known me when I was in Jamaica or when I was in school or any of that thing, right? And so there are people now that is experiencing Dr. Joan T. Randall, right? And this is who they see. They didn't see the homelessness, Bree.
Yes.
They didn't see the abuse. They didn't see $20 a week to buy food for me and my children. They didn't see the car being repossessed. So they can't want my story. They
Yes.
can't want this story now. Dr. Joan T. Randall, executive producer, multi best-selling author. They cannot want the story, because this story that is now is years of walking through the fire. It's years of laying on the floor crying. It's years of pain. It's years of shame. It's years of lack. So you can't want what somebody have, no matter what. You can't want their story. You can't want what they have, because you don't know what it took to get them there.
Yes. And what would you say about, that saying, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors? Sometimes you see some people and it looks as if they have this perfect life. When they go home, you don't know if that person was beaten. You don't know what has happened. You don't know if they were able to pay their bills. You don't know what is going on in their lives. And it's like the more that we hear these stories about celebrities, a lot of people, I'm not saying don't admire celebrities if that's your thing, but there's a lot of these people live very superficial lives, and their lives are not always what we see. you know we see what they allow us to see, and it's like as time has gone on, as I've read books, as I've watched different documentaries, and you find out these people had some serious struggles.
Girl, listen. I always say that social media is a highlight reel.
It's true.
It's just, it's almost like the trailer to a movie. So all you're seeing about people's lives is the trailer. All you're
Yes.
seeing about people's life is their highlight reel, right? It's
Yes.
a moment in time that something is happening and they just want to post that, right?
Yes.
But you don't know behind the scenes. You don't know if they're struggling to pay their mortgage or their rent. You don't know if their car is repossessed. There's a lot you don't know, right? So that's what happened. We're living in a microwave world.
Yes, we are.
You're right. You pop it in the microwave and in 30 seconds it's ready, right? It's not the reality of people's lives. And so
That's true.
I try not to even use social media to judge myself against anyone at all, because that's not the standard that I live by.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
What should I do if I don't like the story that I have to tell? I know for years I was stuck in a certain place of sadness and regret.
Hmm.
And I was so hung up on that. I stayed stuck there for a very long time. And I got to the place where, is this the story that I want to tell others about me? Is this what I want to write about? How can I uplift someone else about my journey through grief? You know, the death of a child, the end of a marriage, starting over without giving some kind of hope, but authentically. I had to make some changes in my mindset. So, what would you like to say to those who they would like to tell their story, but they don't like the story that they have to tell at the present moment?
Yeah. You know what? The only thing I could say about that is it's your story. You got to just own it.
Yes,
That's, you know what I mean? It's, oh yeah, you may not like it because there's some unfortunate things that happened. It's sad, it's unbelievable, it's shameful. But at the end of the day, you overcame it.
yes,
So if you're still here sitting listening to us, or still breathing, still alive, there's a purpose in that story.
yes.
There was a reason why you experienced what you experienced. And we don't like difficult things. We don't
That's
like when
true.
bad things happen, right? But you overcame. And so now you have an opportunity to be able to use your story that you don't like and help somebody else who's going through it currently. To,
Yes,
I didn't like it. This is what I experienced. I didn't like it. My son died. I didn't like that my son died. And, I didn't like that I have to go through a divorce. I didn't like what I did. I didn't like what was happening to me. I didn't like that I couldn't drive until whatever. I didn't like my story. I didn't like myself during those times. But I'm here. I
yes,
overcame. I grew up. I got better. Life got a little bit easier. So if you're going through this now, there is hope for you too. It is
yes.
not the end of the world, and you don't have to be ashamed or afraid or, embarrassed by sharing the story. So you may not like the story, but it's your journey.
Amen. And
It
it's
is
just a
your
part
journey.
of your story. It's not the story, but
There you
it's a
go.
part of your story.
It's the journey.
Let's talk about the importance of knowing about our family's roots. You know, I wanted to tell you that I'm pretty sure, Joan, that my great grandfather is from Buff Bay. I don't know his name. I don't know any of that. I
Mhm.
thought about you and all the friends I have that's from Buff Bay, and I'm saying to myself, you know what? Maybe you're related to one of your friends and you don't even know it. There were things that I wish I'd asked my grandparents. I've never seen a photograph of my parents or my grandparents when they were children.
Wow.
And I've often wondered, what were their lives like when they were younger? And I wish, my father did share some things with me later in life, but I wish I would have known more about him. How important is it for us for our kids to know about our family's roots? How important is that?
It is super important because let me tell you what happens. Things follow the bloodline.
Yes,
things follow the bloodline. So if you really think about it, right? Your father abused your mom. Where did he get that from?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who knows? It may have been in the bloodline. Maybe
Yeah.
his father did it. Maybe his grandfather did it. Right?
Yeah.
So because things follow, and this is biblical, this is not
Yeah.
just making stuff up, right? That's why it says, right, that the sins of the parents visits the third and the fourth generation. That is biblical because things follow the bloodline in a pattern. And if you don't know your true history, you don't know how to prepare your kids. And
True.
so what happens is there is this blank space in the bloodline, right? And it carries on and carries on and carries on, right? So you may not know it because probably your parent is no longer here and they didn't know much or whatever it is, right? Which is unfortunate, but now we are here. It is important for us to share. If we don't know our history from our grandparents or our parents, let's share our history, my
Yes.
history. That's why my daughters had to know what I experienced.
Yes.
Because if I had hidden that domestic violence or not say anything, zip my lip and said, "Oh, don't tell anybody," because my oldest daughter saw it, right? Don't
Right.
tell anybody, right? I am acquiescing to that behavior to make it look like, it's kind of okay as long as you don't speak about it, right?
Yes.
But I share what I know of my grandmother, my grandfather with my children because I want them to see, hey, my daughter's father beat me. My daughter has to know that because she has to be able to see the signs so that
Yes.
she doesn't fall into that trap, right? So it's so important that we dig deep. Find a family member that can give you some history. But if
Yes.
you don't have that, start with you. Share your
Yes.
story, share your life. Let your life be an example to your children, bad or good. So if they see those things coming into their lives, they know when to pause and say, "This doesn't look right." Because I remember mom told me about this and I experienced this, and I'm not going to accept this. Right. So it's very important that the history is told.
Yes. I'm thinking back to I was about 14 when Roots came out. Alex Haley's Roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it really affected my life in a way that I couldn't even articulate it. But that was my first time I remember crying watching television. I
Wow.
was so moved by the story. And it's like if I hadn't watched it, if I hadn't read the book, there's so much that I wouldn't have known, but it created an interest in me in wanting to know. I think it's really a wonderful thing to know about where your family came from, whether they accomplished anything. There's so many things. What's the show that I watch it every week and I can't? Dr. Gates. Dr. Gates, he has a show on PBS where, he helps people to trace back, their ancestors. And I think it's always so wonderful when they find out all these exciting things about their family's history. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for tuning in. So my next question is, Joan, the facade of bling. How is it? It's taint, in my opinion, it's tainted many stories. I think a lot of people, they look at celebrities, they look at the lifestyle, and they figure this is how I plan to live my life. Some people don't have a plan, but they set out to follow someone else's path instead of their own. So let's talk about how that has tainted many a story.
Yeah, because we want to be like the Joneses, right?
Yes.
A lot of people desire that type of living. And then, sometimes that's where you get this syndrome because you feel like you're not authentic. You're not who you are because I am watching Bree doing her podcast, but I'm sitting here feeling like I'm not doing anything, and so there is a level of jealousy because I should be there. Or I see you doing your podcast, and because there is a level of jealousy, because I feel like I need to be doing something too, then I go ahead and start a podcast as well, right? And so when I hear the word bling, I'm not looking at it as flashy things. I'm
Right.
looking at it as a copycat, right?
Yes.
Because people are out there trying to be who they are not.
It's true.
You know what I mean?
And how can you be happy? How
And
can you be happy?
it's a pretentious existence, right?
Yes.
And there are times when I post things that I am okay with the whole public knowing, right? Sometimes my sister Shelly will say, "Oh, your business is always out there." No, I post what I want you to know. The stuff that I
Yeah,
want you to know, you may never see it.
exactly.
But again, the lack of authenticity is what social media has created, right?
It has.
Today I preached at my church, and the message was the system versus the savior, because we're caught up in the systemic thing, right? The systematic thing of everybody trying to be this or be that, or everybody is dancing on TikTok to get ratings, or everybody is doing all these things, you know what I mean? Have the camera in their home doing all of these things so people can get money from TikTok and YouTube and all the things. And I am not knocking anybody's money, because if you can use those platforms to get your coins, I'm going to say go for it, right? But sometimes we overdo it, and
I agree.
it's not real. It is a false narrative. It is not the reality of their lives, and I do not like people that are not authentic. I do
Yes.
not like it. I do not like liars, and I don't like people that pretend. So
Yes. I totally agree with you on that.
yeah.
What factors should I take into consideration when I decide to tell my story?
So the most important thing is the who, the what, the why, and the how. All right. So who are you telling your story to? Who is your audience? That's the first thing you want to think about. I'm telling my story. Who is going to buy this book? Because when you know that, it's a different understanding of what you write,
Yes.
right? The second thing is, why am I writing the story? Why now? Why am I writing it, right? And the answer should be because I needed to change somebody's life, right? And then the other thing is, what parts of the story do I need to share? Because you don't have to share the whole of your life, but the most important pieces of the story that other people can relate to is what needs to be told. And then what is it that they're going to get from the book? Like, what is in it for them? How can they utilize all the things that have helped you overcome? How
Yes.
can they use that in their lives so that they too can have a level of success or overcome or be influenced or feel committed or feel, excited to also share their story, or to use your tips, tools, and strategies implemented in their lives, and for things to be better for them too.
Yes. Andrew says good stuff. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you so much for watching. My story, my ministry. I
Mhm.
believe in my heart that losing my son, yeah, it's a tough thing to go through. Going through a divorce, starting life over in my 50s, they were all tough things, but in a way, I feel that these things have become a ministry of sorts. So, what would you say to those? Like, no matter how dirty you think your story is, no matter how sad, you could have been a drug addict, you could have been an alcoholic, but your story can lead to a ministry. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's me right here. I am living proof. It was one book that created all of this, that started all of this, right? And so, yes, your story is your ministry. And I'll say this again, because you overcame, right? It allows you to be able to share that so other people can find the inspiration in it. And I always say this, I trademark books to business and beyond. And the reason why I trademarked it, because and I wanted to own that phrase, is because that's exactly what I did. I wrote one book in 2016, and then I just kept writing until I built a whole company just from a book. So a book is a ministry. If you write that book about grieving your son, right? And you write the story first, and I always say this to you, write the story first, get the story out. Then the second book is going to be a guided journal, right? Giving people tips, tools, and strategies to get over the grief
Yes.
of a child or a loved one or a spouse or the death of a parent or something like that, right? And then so now you have two books. You have the story, you have the guided journal. But what next, right? The next could be a workshop, right?
Yep.
Use the elements of the workbook to create a workshop, right? And the workshop is going to cover those pillars that you have in your workbook. From a workshop, you can have a event. You know what I mean? You can have an event where you invite people, you have other speakers. That's four streams of income, and it is your ministry
Yes.
because you believe in the power of helping people overcome grief. That's a ministry right there.
Yes.
So I love storytelling because listen, you can't really connect to the human spirit without a story.
I agree.
It's one thing for me to say, hey, I'm this or I'm that, or I've experienced this. But let me tell you something, girl, I was a beaten woman. I went through domestic violence. I went through homelessness. My car was repossessed. I was, evicted from an apartment. That's the foundation of who I
Yes.
am. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And people can say, whoa, Joan, I didn't know you go through that. Yes, I did. Right? That is my ministry. My ministry is to say, you don't have to stay stuck in the past.
Yes.
A lot of us are stuck in the past.
Too many. Too
God
many of
has
us.
already brought us out, but we're still stuck in
Yes.
that shame, right?
Yes,
So,
I totally agree with you on that. I'd like to welcome Colleen Watson. Thank you so much for tuning in, Colleen. She says, "Hi, Bridget and Joan. So glad I did not miss this podcast. A little late, but already finding it interesting. Thank you so much for your kind words." You
I
know,
love her.
oh my gosh, Colleen. It's like it's just so like
Amazing.
when I talk to you or Colleen or any of our old classmates, I
Yeah.
still see you guys as we were back then as kids. It's so weird. But
Twins, Carol and Colleen. Oh my God. It's amazing to like,
I think back. Hello, Sophia. Thank you so much for tuning in.
hi
I think I
Sophie.
think back to when Tina Turner wrote her book. What was it called? I Tina, and she spoke
Love
about the
got to do
abuse
with it.
that
I
she
Tina,
went through. The abuse that she went through with her husband at the
yeah. Mhm.
time, and then it became a movie. And she had this big comeback from her writing that book. But I remember as I read that book, the book made me so angry for what she was going through. I found myself like like yelling at Ike. I don't know Ike Turner, but
I
I
know,
remember just
crazy.
having disdain for him because it's like, how could you treat Tina like this?
Yeah.
I think it took a lot of courage and a lot of guts, just like with you, to share that story because I think women who are stuck at the moment in the very same situation, the hope that you can give to them when you share authentically, giving them hope, knowing that, hey, I don't have to stay there. Thank
Right.
you so much, Sophie. I appreciate your kind words. Thank you, Colleen.
And here is the thing about that too. The power of listen, I have this quote that goes like this. The pen creates an indelible moment in time that can never be
Yes.
erased, right? And the reason why I came up with that, this is when I came up with that phrase when I went to Kenya for the first time. My book got me into Kenya. That's the power of telling your story, right? It was
Yes.
a book that got me. The first time I traveled to the motherland was Kenya. And I had an opportunity to preach there, like a 1,200 member church. I had an opportunity to do a workshop about writing, and I had an opportunity to create my business there. Right, I still have clients in Kenya. As a matter of fact, my book cover designer is in Nigeria. Right,
Oh, wow.
so I have a lot of connection on the motherland, and I love that. But it's a story. It's telling a story that got me there.
Yes.
The telling of the story that gave me the experience to travel there. It's the telling of the story that gave me the experience to be on television. It's the telling of the story that gave me the experience to do so many amazing things. Our book is pitched for a movie, Bags in the Attic.
I can't wait for that to come out as a movie,
Yeah,
honestly.
we pitched it for a screenplay, right? They have to rewrite it, which is crazy, right? So they take the book and they rewrite it in a screenplay for it to be a film, right? But all of these things would have never happened had
If
I
you
not
didn't
tell
write it.
that story. It
Yes.
was embarrassing. It was the things that I shared
I
about myself.
remember you asked me, you were honest with me about that. And I told you I would not be embarrassed because you told the truth.
Yeah,
And I think in you telling the truth, it just, like I said, it gave your book more credibility.
yeah.
I'd like to welcome Irene Roper. Thank you so much for tuning in. So,
Miss
Joan, let's talk about the different aspects of our story. You
Mhm.
know, I look at the different aspects of my story. I know they can help different people in different ways.
Yeah.
So, how important is it to address the different aspects of our story?
So there is a layout to your story, right? So and depending on how you want to present it. So there are memoirs and there are guides, right? So I'm just going to give you those two, right?
Okay.
So in a memoir, there are four elements to your story. You always want to start with a hook, right? The most either tragic thing that has ever happened to you or the best thing that has ever happened to you. And once you lay out your story that way, then you give the backstory of how you were raised and your younger years. And then whatever happened in the hook, you've got to tie it in with a resolution, right? And then the conclusion. So there's four parts to a story. If you're writing your story about you, it's the hook, the body, the resolution, the conclusion. That is how simple it is, right?
Okay.
Now, if you're writing a guide and you want to tell different aspects of your story, let's look at it from a pillar perspective. You lost a son, right? If you're going to do a guided book about that experience, you're going to tell probably is the first thing that happened is the emotion about the death, right? Then you're going to go through the grieving process. You talk about that. Then you're going to go through the beating up of yourself, the acknowledging what did I do wrong? You're going to talk about
Yes.
that. Then you're going to talk about how did the healing journey start? Did I have to go through therapy, right? And I call those pillars.
Yes.
As you're writing that story, now you start to give different elements of the emotional experience that you went through to go from the death of your son to healing.
Yes.
What were those things, right? So think about a story like think about a book as if you're telling me what happened to you, right? It's the same thing with a book. You're just telling me your story. You're telling me what happened. But guess what? That will never go away. For your next generation, your children and your grandchildren, they'll always be able to have something to say. My grandmother did this, or my great great grandmother did this. That is the power in storytelling. It is a history of who you are. Remember
Yes.
how you asked me earlier about the bloodline, the family, knowing they didn't write books.
No.
They did not have a book. But I know right now, my grandson Israel or my four grandchildren, their Gigi has written 17 books. My books are in the Library of Congress. So they will always be able to find something that I have written that they can go back and reference and say, wow, this was what my Gigi experienced. I may never live to see a great grandchild, but Bags in the Attic will be there for the next 100, 200 years that my great, great, great grandchild could go read my story
Yes.
about what I experienced. So that is a legacy. that I'm leaving.
How do I tie my childhood story, my adult story? Should I decide on, you know what, maybe what happened to me as a child was more interesting, or maybe my adult life? How do we, maneuver through that?
Well, that's kind of where I was just talking about the
Yeah.
how to write the story. You always want to start, and most often, okay, so let me give you an example of Bags in the Attic, right? Bags in the Attic is broken up into four pieces, although it has like 17 chapters, right? The first part of the story is when I talk about when I almost took the life of my children and myself.
Yes.
That's called a hook.
I was about to say I was hooked from that page. Yeah. So yes.
That's
Yes.
the hook because I want to bring you into the story and keep you all the way through you finish the book, right? So I started off at the lowest point in my life when I hit rock bottom, when I thought that there was no way out of this abusive relationship, and I tried to kill myself for my children, right? That's how I started it. And after I framed that whole scene, is what I call it, then I gave you a cliffhanger. I stopped it like when my daughter hugged me and whatever, right? I stopped it there. And then I went back to
Back.
childhood and I talked about my parents. I talked about how my dad was a womanizer. I talked about
Yeah.
what I experienced, the lie I told my mother when I caught my father with a woman, right? And how that affected me. I talked about leaving high school and working at the public
Yeah.
electric company and what happened to me with the boss, right?
Yeah.
So I and then how my life kind of just went all these different kind of ways, right? So I started with a hook, then I went back and taught because I wanted people to see some of those experiences that I had to
Yeah.
understand how I could have gotten into this domestic abuse situation. And then I brought it back together. I took the hook and then I wrapped up the hook. I talked about running away from my abuser and how that went and the homelessness and all of that stuff. And then the conclusion was me getting out of that and becoming a regional vice president for Macy's, right?
Yes.
And how we got out of the whole thing. So my book has all the elements, but it's how I laid it out is
Yes.
really the power of the
You did
book.
a great job. I mean, I can't say enough about that book.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the damage that is done when emotions are suppressed and denied. I think back to going through a period where I was actually ashamed of my grief. I
Mhm.
was ashamed because I felt I was being judged, like, why is she still grieving? Why can't she move on?
Yeah.
But I found as I started to think about myself,
Yeah.
let my feelings out as I've been writing.
Yes.
I can tell you, I don't think I've written without crying,
Yeah.
but it's like there's a release. Every time I finish, that release is there. I may be reliving certain things, but I think that's what will make it authentic because I'm being honest in what I write. But yeah, when the tears come out, it's been very healing. So I'd like you to talk about the damage that is done and what writing can do to help to bring healing.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just address you ask me about suppressed emotions and emotions that you deny. That causes physiological things to happen in your body.
Yes.
Let me tell you, that mind is connected to everything that happens in the brain and in the heart and through every veins in your body, right? So if you're holding on to unresolved emotions, unresolved pain, it is going to show up in some kind of way, in anger, in outbursts, in bipolar disorder, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Is going to trigger all different kinds of things, right? You defensive and all these things, right? So it is important that you acknowledge the pain you're going through. And therapy is a great thing.
Yes, it is.
Therapy is a great
I can vouch for it. I'm still in therapy, and I
yeah,
think it's the best thing I could have done for myself.
awesome.
It's like an investment in me, and
Yeah,
it's encouraged me to continue to heal and
yeah,
not just say to myself, "Oh, I'm healed." I stopped for a while, but then I went back
yeah,
because I realized It helped me to process a lot of things. And, I may be great this year, but next year, when the milestones come around, it's been an up and down journey. But I will say through writing and the podcast and therapy, it's definitely helped on the healing journey.
Let me tell you about journaling, right? So, and this is what I would encourage anybody to do, right? We all sometimes wear masks. And when we go in our little corner in our home, there's sometimes a smell, something we watch on TV. Our memory just comes back flooding. That can cause pain, right?
Yes.
So, my suggestion is to just write it down. I am
Yes.
who I am today because of the power of the pen.
Yes.
And I would have never imagined that when I left my 25-year job in my 50s, that I would be doing this. I've been in business now for 9 years, right? And all because of a pen, all because of this desire to write and to share my story. And I would have never imagined in a million years that the gift that God gave me was storytelling,
The power
right?
of the pen.
Of the pen. But if you pick up your pen and journal or write, this is what it does. It's like it takes out from what you're experiencing, what you're going through, the trauma, the pain, and you can literally now look at it on paper, right?
Yes.
It's a psychological thing, right? That you're writing it, and now my pain is on paper. I have a choice. I can rip that to shreds or I can burn it.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm telling you, it does magic. Like
I
magic,
agree.
but it does. It feels like magic because
I,
yeah,
I definitely agree. What do you think of everyone is a star in their own right? And I'm asking this because I look back, hindsight is always 2020. And I can see where I put myself in predicaments where it's like I was a part of the supporting cast in someone else's story.
yeah,
And it's like, putting myself on the back burner. And it's like, you know what? I want to star in my own story. And it's not about being self absorbed or anything like that. But I think in order to heal and in order to grow, I think I need to be the star of my story. What's your opinion on that?
yeah. We are all stars in our own story. I'm telling
Yes.
you this: if you are here today, listening to me or watching what you're doing now, what Sophie is doing, because Sophie does a lot of amazing things. Back home in Jamaica, what Colleen is doing. I see Miss Irene is on. I see Mike. All of us. First of all, let me just say something about Titchfield High School, Portland.
Say
Okay.
it, say
Okay.
it, say it, say
Listen,
it.
listen, we special. Andrew, I
Yes.
see Andrew on your program all the time. We are some special people. Listen, these Jamaican people, Yachty, oh my God, we have some staying power. I
It's
call
true.
it, I call it stick to itiveness. We stick
Yes.
to the things that we stick to, right? Okay, but back to the question that you asked me about being a star in our own. We are all stars.
Yes.
We have overcame some incredible odds, right? And
I
here
agree.
we are still to this day in our early 50s, late 50s, early 60s, right? And we're still making it happen. We're all on our second wind. And so we're all stars in our own story. If you're
Yes.
here today, you overcame some things. You're a star, right?
Yes.
You own that, and that's a powerful thing to be, and you should walk in that power and the authenticity of who you are, and know that you know you are here because you made the effort to be here,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes. Joan, I know that anyone that hears you speak about writing, they can tell just how passionate you are about the whole process.
Mhm.
I'd like to give you the opportunity to share with the viewers what makes you so passionate, not only about your writing, but encouraging others to write and to tell their stories.
Because we need to leave the legacy. Like, it's one thing for us to say, this is what I do, or this is what I've done, or this is what I've experienced. You can say till you're blue in the face, but people may not remember it a year from now,
Yeah.
right? But when you put something with your name on it and it can be found on Amazon or somebody can buy it and your name is there, it lasts for a lifetime. 2000 years later, we're reading the same Bible or
Yes.
a version of it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
Historical narratives, we know them because they're written. Somebody
Yes.
wrote it, right? So why would you live on this earth for 60, 70 years and not pen your own thing?
Yes.
I
I
don't
I
care if the
I
children.
I, I totally agree. Andrew says, "Okay, I am convinced."
Andrew, come on, Andrew. Like,
And
why would
he
you?
definitely has a lot to write
He
about.
does. Why would you not pen something? Why would you not leave a piece of you behind? Listen, we all came here with gifts and skills and talents and treasures and abilities and seeds that God put inside of us. Those things are not for us. The things that we experience, right? When we come out of it, it's no longer ours. It belongs to somebody that is waiting on your book, your
Yeah.
story to change their lives. And we are preventing people from changing their lives because we're not sharing the story.
And that's the truth. Luce, Stephanie is saying, Joan, I have a stack of love letters over 30 years from my late husband that I need to put in a book format.
On that is what I'm talking about. You don't even need anything. You need those letters, and the book can be called Letters from My Love.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
It's like a book
Yes.
of poetry, it's a book of words. So now
Yes.
it's not just your story. This is your husband's story too. This is a legacy.
Yes.
Can you imagine your great great grandchildren 100 years from now reading that book, Lucille, and saying, wow, look at what my great 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 grandfather wrote to my
Yes.
great 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 grandmother.
That
Is
that's what it's about.
that is legacy of the bloodline, of the family line. Those
Yes.
things don't go away
Yes.
at all.
Go for it, Stephanie. Go for it. Andrew says the word of God says we
Yes.
overbuy our testimonies.
Listen, let
Now,
me just say, can I just say one thing? I know you're going to
sure.
ask the next question. The word right, WRITE, is written in the Bible 365 times.
Yes.
Just the one word, right. And then don't even talk about, right? Don't even talk about like, for it is written.
Yes.
For it
Yes.
is written is recorded 40 times in the New Testament alone. That is
Yes.
something to be said about writing.
It's true. It's true. So
You get
now
me all
let's
riled up about this.
so now we'll be talking about legacy, the legacy of our truth. What does that do for a family? I want my family to know my true story, my authentic story. How important is it, the legacy of our truth?
So our legacy is not for us, right? Because we experienced the thing that we experienced. And so now we leave that for the next generation, right? Let me tell you what legacy looks like. So when I got my doctorate degree, my grandson was there, my 7-year-old grandson. He was 6 at the time. And he said, he was screaming from the audience, like probably was the only child. I don't know how many people were there, maybe 200-300 people. And all I heard when they called my name, Dr. Joan T. Randall Anos Casas, or whatever that's called, I heard my grandson say, JJ, screaming at the top of his lungs. And then he said, oh God, JJ, oh God, JJ,
He was so proud. He was proud.
oh my God, and then last week when we launched the documentary for the book, prior to the documentary being shown, he was there and he said, Gigi, can I take the mic? And I said, yes. And this young man, 7 years old, he got up in front of all the people in this room and he said, "Hi, everybody. How are you doing?" He said, "My name is Israel, and Dr. Joan T. Randall is my Gigi. And I'm proud of what my grandma is."
Oh, how
That
beautiful.
is legacy. That is legacy because
Yes,
he knows I own a company. He sees me sometimes on TV. He sees me being interviewed. He see all the things I, not just him, all of them, my four grandchildren.
yes.
Right? And so, and they talk about me to their teachers. That is legacy because they're seeing what is possible right in front of their eyes.
Colleen says, "You are definitely inspiring me to write that book that I know I have inside
You
of me,
better.
and also put all my poems in a book form as a legacy for the next generation." Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
And then just
Amen.
get it in the Library of Congress, y'all. And I can tell you how to do that. Get it in the, Miss Roper taught for so many years.
And I don't know if you saw, she was on 2 episodes where she shared her journey,
I know.
with diabetes. And I tell you, I was so moved. That's a book. That's 2 books right there at
Oh,
least. I
listen, you,
believe Irene should write a book.
yes, yes. We
I
need,
should we
we've
need
got to set it up because we may, as we said earlier, Bree, we may not know much about my great grandparents, right? Because they didn't write, didn't leave a legacy. I don't know. They left some land and stuff in Jamaica, but we don't want the land. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But I would have loved to be able to read a book from my grandmother or
And
something
see,
written
and
on a piece of
that's leading to my last question for the night. First, Lucille wants to know, she says, "Joan, I did not hear whether you are an editor."
I am a publisher. We have a whole publishing company. We have certified editors. We have book cover designers. We do formatting. We do everything from start to finish. We have a whole publishing company. Yeah. We have
So
editors in our
I'm
company. There's like
hoping that
four.
from this podcast that someone will be writing a book from this.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking for anyone who decides to take this step, please come back as a guest to
Yeah.
talk about your
Oh,
journey. I
definitely.
would love that. So, Joan, I have to talk about the pain of not knowing. I think of conversations I wish I would have had with my dad. I wish I would have known more about him. I
Mhm.
wish I would have known more about my grandparents. I think what you've been talking about over the years is so important. I think it is important to leave that legacy behind,
Yeah.
leave that book behind. Let me read and see. This is what my grandfather, I remember him saying that money cannot buy a good name. Money
Mhm.
cannot buy a good name. And he would say, he was to me a very wise man.
Right.
And when I was younger, I don't think I appreciated his wisdom like I do today.
Mhm.
I wish he had written a book. And trust me when I tell you, I believe he could have written a very good book.
Yeah.
So the pain of not knowing, now I look back, it is painful because I wish that I knew more. Let's talk about the pain of not knowing the stories.
The pain of not knowing leaves a void.
Yes.
It just leaves a void. It's a blank slate. It's like an abyss
Yes.
because you some people don't know where they're coming from. They don't know what what the generation did, or like sometimes I have one living aunt by my dad's side, and she's 84, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth asking her, so tell me about grandma, tell me about papa, tell me about and sometimes she'll tell me, but I really don't know much about like my great grandparents. You know what I mean? There's a history there,
Yes.
outside of the Thaxters living in Portland and really coming from Great Britain. There's a huge history of my family right there in Cooper's Hill in Port Antonio, right? But I don't know all the ins and outs. You see what I'm saying? And I would have loved to know that. So I wasn't equipped with a lot of stuff from my historical bloodline. But baby, trust me when I tell you, my great grandchildren and grandchildren will know, starting with me. You know what? Starting
Yes.
with me, because we have the conversations about the things. I have a grandson that's 10 years old and he wants to read Bags in the Attic. And I'm like, you ain't ready for Bags in the Attic.
Right. Right. Not at 10, not at 10, not at
Like,
10,
it's
not
like
at
Gigi, can you autograph a copy of Bags? I'm like, nope.
10.
5 more years, or maybe 6 more years, you'll
Yes.
get a copy. But he goes, oh my God, I just want to read it. I hear so much about it. I'm like, no, not
No,
at
he's not ready for it. Not yet.
not at 10. No.
No, no. And I would and I would like to say to the viewers, if you haven't read Bags in the Attic, it's a book you can order on Amazon. And I tell you, you will not regret it. You will not regret it. I can't say enough about that book.
Yeah.
So, Joan, I can't count how many times you've been on. You're welcome anytime you have a standing invitation. What are your closing thoughts for tonight?
You know what? I'm gonna use my quote that I coined in 2021 when the first time I went to Kenya is the pen creates an indelible moment in time that can never be erased.
I love that.
Power
I
of the
love that.
pen. And that's what I would close with. And know that your story, the Bible talks about we shall know them by their fruit,
Yes.
right? And here is what a fruit is. It starts with a seed, right? Put it in the ground. Let's talk about an apple. Put it in the ground, you water it, right? You steward it. It comes into a seedling first with some leaves, and then it grows into a tree.
Yes.
And then when the tree matures, the tree bears apples. Those apples does not belong to the tree. The apples belong to us, the people who receive from the tree,
Yes.
right? And there are bad apples and good apples. So it's the same thing with us. Like when we grow and we mature and we get to a place that we are ripe, we're supposed to use our gifts and our skills and our talents to serve others.
Yes.
Writing is a way to serve the masses.
I totally agree. Andrew said a kid's version. I don't know if Joan could do a kid's version of Bags in the Attic.
Andrew, no, darling, can't do that.
Joan, for years I have been writing and I've started and stopped, but I realize now it was just a very painful process.
Mhm.
And because of healing, because of therapy, I think now I am better equipped to deal with the pain when it hits me as I write. So, for those who are writing their story and you think it's too painful or you think it's too ugly, you think, it's embarrassing, that's why you need to write it,
Yeah.
because there is someone else out there that's feeling just like you. Someone has to have the courage to tell their story to set someone else free. Joan has set a lot of us free by writing her book. It took a lot of courage to write Bags in the Attic, I'm sure, Joan.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I am so thankful you did decide to do it because, I mean, that book has been a blessing and I'm sure it will continue to be a blessing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I can't wait for it to become a screenplay. Like
Oh
I'm
my
it's a book
gosh, I'm
I cannot
excited.
wait. Yeah. So I don't know how long that is gonna take, but I pitched it last year and it was accepted. So, we'll see what happens to it. But I'm truly honored and really excited that, I could pen something and people around the world appreciate,
Yes, yeah,
how
I think
I
to
can
see it
read.
as a movie, it will be great. Now, what about it being on Audible?
Bags in the Attic.
Yes.
I think it is.
It
Let
is
me
on Audible?
check. I think it is. I have to double check. I
Okay,
have
I'll check. I
several.
can check my app because I'm like, that's a book.
Yeah.
Like, I love Audible, and that's a book I would definitely love to listen to. Colleen said, I enjoyed listening to this podcast so much. Very motivating. Thank you. That's what we want to hear. And
Yes.
Irene says, I do have most of the info written down, so it's just a matter of formatting.
You don't
Great.
have to yeah, you don't have to format it. Just write. If you get a publisher, they can format your book. Yeah,
Okay.
we do that
Okay.
even in our company. The only thing the author is responsible for is writing the manuscript. We
Okay.
we do everything else.
Okay.
everything else. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, for those who watch the replay, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them. Joan, this was wonderful. As usual, I always enjoy our conversations. Next week, Andrew will be on and we'll be talking about emotional eating. I'd like to thank everyone that tuned in tonight. And once again, Dr. Joan T. Rand. I can't forget. I have to make sure I acknowledge that accomplishment.
Thank
We
you.
are all very proud of you, Joan.
You.
Very, very proud of you.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, my honor. I'm humbled. This little Portland girl from Jamaica. I love my folks. I love my Titchfield people. And um, how amazing it is that we're making a difference in the world, in each of our own way right
Yes.
here in the United States, coming from that little Titchfield school. It's incredible. I love it. I'm honored.
I mean, what a blessing. What a blessing. Stephanie says, I'm sending my love letters. Stephanie, go for it. I'm looking forward to that book. Oh, well, thanks everyone. I'm wishing everyone a blessed week. And, Joan, once again, thank you. This meant a lot to me. I was very excited about this.
Thank you so, so much. And, anybody who needs to connect with me can go to victoriousupress.com. That's our website. And there is a contact. They can just go to Victorious You, and Victorious is like Victor, RIOUS, like victory, but it has RIOUS, and it's YOU Press. And if you just want to do a discovery call with me, you just go to contact us and fill out the form, and we'll be able to talk to you about your book. Yeah, we do that all day, every day. We're now about 500 books in as a company.
And how many bestsellers have you done, Joan?
100%. All
Ooh,
500 authors have been on the best-selling list.
that's pretty awesome. I'm telling you, it makes a difference when you go with someone who knows what they're doing, someone who has the experience. And like I said before, I would not ask Joan to come and talk about this if I didn't have trust in her. She's the real deal, and I can vouch for her.
Thank you so much. Thank
Oh,
you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Take care, everyone. God bless.